Welcome back, aliens. My name is Evan Reddy, and in this video, we'll talk about Spring Boot JDBC. The thing is, if you want to connect your application with database in Java, you have to use something called JDBC, which stands for Java Database Connectivity. And you will say, we know that, right? So basically, you can use JDBC few steps, and then you can connect your application with database easily. But the problem is, as a developer, you want to reduce your work, right? And also you have to make sure that the application is optimized. So let's talk about the optimization part here. See, the thing is, every time you send a request from your application to database, it creates a new request. And then if you have multiple connections, imagine you already have few connections and now you are submitting a new request. Now you do have these connections, right? Can't we just reuse the same connection instead of getting a new one? Now that's something you have to manually do. Or you can use something called a data source here. Now data source will have a configuration, and also it provides you something called a connection pooling. So basically it will already have few connections and you can use those connections. And again, you can do this by using any external data source or connection pooling concept, and you can make it work. So that's one thing. The second is about developers' work. So you have to write those beautiful 7 or 6 steps to achieve JDBC, and you can do that, but the only problem is the more code you write, you are basically increasing the number of lines which will have a bug. So every new line is a potential bug, right? So reduce the number of lines which you write and use certain tools or frameworks which will do it for you. And these frameworks and tools have been tested by everyone. So if it works for you as well. Now that's where we have to use a template. Now there's something called JDBC template. Now JDBC template will help you with data source. That means the connection pooling concept will be done. And it will also help you to write your code in an efficient way. And all these things are provided in Spring Boot JDBC. Now why Spring Boot is because if you want to build enterprise application, and if you want to follow all the design patterns, best practices, and a framework where you can get the libraries and everything working together, Spring is one of the best framework. And that's why we are going to use Spring Boot JDBC, is because under the Spring umbrella, we have a lot of projects, and this is one of it. So let's get started with the code, where we're going to talk about how do you build an application, and we'll learn by building something, right? So it will make much more sense. So let's start the code. The thing is, if you want to build this project, you need a IDE. Now you can choose any IDE which you want. Maybe you can use Eclipse, IntelliJ, VS Code, your choice. I'm going to use IntelliJ IDEA, and that too a community version because that's for free and it works. So we'll be using that. So to get the project, for Spring, if you're using a Spring tools on VS Code or Eclipse, you can directly get the project from there. And if you're using the ultimate version of IntelliJ IDEA, you can create the project directly from your IDE. But since we are using a community version, I'm going to use the Spring Initializer. So you can head to the start.spring.io and you can get your project from here, the base skeleton of the project. So the first thing you will mention is a project type. I'm going to go with Maven. Language, I will choose Java. Of course, that's what you're doing now. And then the Spring Boot version, I'm selecting 3.2. Next, you have to mention the group ID. So I'm going to type here com.tedisco. The project, since I'm working with Spring JDBC demo, that's the project name I will give. And will not change anything here. The packaging, I want it to be type of jar. And the version for Java I'm using in my machine is 21. Now, based on which version you have, you can either just choose 21 or you can select 17. Dependencies. So basically we have to add 2 things only. One is the JDBC API. Now this is your Spring Boot JDBC. And you have to add a database. Now which database we are going to use? Of course, you can choose any DBMS which you want. Now we'll be using an embedded one. So if you have Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, MS SQL, you can use that. The only thing is you have to do some additional configuration. And I will tell you where to do that configuration, but we are going to use an in-memory database here. And by default, when you use in-memory like H2, it will be pre-configured. So you don't have to do any configuration for that. So these are the 2 libraries we need. And that's it. You can click on generate. It will give you a project. So as you can see, I got the project downloaded, which is Spring JDBC demo. I will just unzip it and open in any IDE which you want. I'm going to use IntelliJ. So let me do that quickly. Okay, so basically I have opened that project in my IDE and it will take some time for it to resolve the dependencies. Now we have added two, which is JDBC and the H2. And we don't have to manually download the H2 driver, because the moment you add H2, it will also have a driver installed. So if I open the pom.xml, you can see we do have H2 here, and we got Spring Boot Starter JDBC. This is what we want. And now we can get the work started. So I will go back here to main, Java, and Spring JDBC demo application, and we can start the coding here. Okay, so one thing I mentioned before, right? If you want to use Postgres or MySQL or any other DBMS, where you will do the configuration. So if you can see, we have a resources folder here. And if you open application.properties, this is where you have to specify those properties. So what properties I'm talking about? You have to specify the URL, you have to specify the username and password and driver. Now basically this variable belongs to spring.datasource.url, and you can set the value for the URL, whichever you want. So that's how you do it. But now we are not going to use MySQL or Postgres. We are going to use H2, which is in memory. The reason I'm using H2 here is because you can directly take this project and run on your machine. If I use Postgres or MySQL, then you have to also install those softwares, you have to configure it, and there will be some issues with that. So let's go stick to H2. Okay, so what we want to do? We want to basically store some data in the database and fetch it from database. So we do have database ready. So the moment you run this application, you will be having H2 database behind the scene running for you. But then what you want to store? So in that case, what I will do is I will create a simple class which will represent a particular table. So normally you can have a relation between a table and your class. Now you will say, how is it possible? See, the thing is, if you think about a table will have a table name, table will have a columns. Let's say we are working with aliens, so every programmer is an alien, right? So a programmer or an alien need an ID, an alien needs a name, and an alien needs a favorite technology. So let's say for me, my favorite technology is Java, blockchain, AI. For you, it might be something different. So basically, every alien will need a technology as well. So 3 columns in the table. And then this columns or this table will also have some data. Let's say 101, which is ID, Naveen, technology Java, let's say 2, Kiran, technology blockchain. So basically you can have this data. In the same way, if you try to relate this with a class, now in a class, basically what you'll have is, you will have a class, of course a class will have a name, a class will have properties, right, variables. Now if you try to match, the class name and the table name look similar. Properties of this class, which is ID, name, and tech, matches with the column names, right? And the objects for this alien class will be the rows. Each object will be 1 row. Now that's how basically you map between the class and the object. And then if you're using any Spring ORM technology, let's say Hibernate, in that case, the table creation happens automatically. Now since we're not using Hibernate here, we have to create the table by ourselves. Yeah, that's something you have to do. Okay, let's create a class here. And I want to create a class for the, let's say, alien. Okay, so when I say alien class, what I want to do is I want to basically create few variables. So I will say private int ID, and then private string name, and private string tech. So basically I need these 3 variables. And for these 3 variables, I also need getters and setters. So we'll right click here and we'll say generate getters and setters. I will just choose these 3 variables, done. I also need a toString method if I want to print the data itself. So I will just right click here, say generate a toString method, and done. I will do one more thing. I will move this particular class, the alien class, to a different package. So this should be into a package of model. So every class should belong to their own packages. So alien is a model class. So I will just move that to a model package. And since we don't have a model package, I will say, hey, move to model package in the SRC. Yes. And you can see it is moved now. So that's done. But if I want my Spring framework to manage this particular bean, I have to use add component. Now, if you're not sure how Spring Boot works, you can check out the video link in the description. I will make sure that you have your Spring Boot video there. Okay, so basically what we are doing with add component is we are asking Spring Framework to handle this object creation, object managing, and object destroying by Spring Framework. I don't want to do that. Okay, so basically when I say I don't have to create the object, how Spring will do it? So basically what I will do is this run method. So I will go back to the main class. So main class is your Spring JDBC demo application. And in this, you can see we are calling a run method. Run returns the object of application context. So I will say application context, context. Now why I'm doing this is because I want to get the hold on a Spring container. Again, I'm assuming that you know Spring Boot here, because if I start teaching you Spring Boot, then it will make the video length of 5 hours. I don't want to do that. So again, you'll find the link in description. You can check it out. Now, let me create the object for alien. So I will say alien1 is equal to. Okay, we have to basically import the package for alien, which is in the model package. Done. And now I want to create the object. The way you can create the object by saying alien, right? But I don't want to create this object by myself. I just want this to be done by Spring Framework. So I will say context.getBean. I want the object for alien.class, right? But the thing is, by default, the type of this alien component is singleton. So basically the bean is singleton. I want to make sure this is prototype. So I will say scope prototype. So what will happen is for different requests, it will create new objects for you. Otherwise you will have multiple alien object or multiple alien references with the same object. So you will have the same data. It doesn't matter how many data you have in your table. Okay, so that's done. And for this alien, what I will do is I will add some values. So let's say the ID I want to add is 111, and I want to say not get ID, I want to say set ID. Alien.set name, I want to set the name as, let's say, Naveen, and alien1.set tech, I want to set the tech as, let's say, Java. Now basically I'm adding these values, and now I got my object ready. I want to store this object in database. How will I do that? Maybe I can simply say, save this data in database. Of course, this will not work. So what you have to do, and you know why this will not work, is because you have not subscribed the channel yet. So if this works on your machine, that means you have already subscribed. Okay, I'm just kidding. So this will not work, right? You have to write Java code there. Now, how will you make this work? Now, basically, this is where you have to write extra classes. See, what happens is, in normal application, you'll be having multiple layers. You'll be having a controller. So if you're building a web application, you'll be having a controller layer. You'll be having a service layer. You'll be having a repository layer. Now, this repository layer is responsible to connect with the database. Of course, I can write my JDBC steps here. In the main, because that's a normal main method, I can write all the beautiful JDBC steps here. But then we don't want to do that. That's what we are doing Spring Boot JDBC here. And this is not a good idea to write your JDBC code inside main. So this should be a part of a separate file. Now, instead of creating a service layer, I will be skipping that. I will directly jump into a repository layer. So I will just create here a repository layer. So I will say new class, and I will say this is a alien repo. Or you can also say DAO if you want. Now repo is responsible, or repository is responsible to connect with database. Okay. Now this is where you will do this stuff. But first of all, we need to have some methods here. Maybe I want to have a method like public void save. So it will save the object. Which object? The alien object, alien, into the database. Okay, so we have to import the package. I will also make sure that this belongs to a service, the repo package. Move to repo, yeah. Okay, so here, what I will do is I will say, at this point, I'm not writing all the code, so I will say added. And then I also need a method which will return the list of aliens. So let's say if I want to fetch all the aliens from the database. Now in this case, I need a method called maybe find all. Method name you can change as you want. I'm just saying find all here. Import the package. And here, let me return a new array list of aliens. Okay, and I'm just returning an empty object. But we'll code this in some time. The idea is I want this to work first of all. And since I want Spring to manage it, I will write add component. So instead of writing add component, what makes sense is to use add repository. For different layers, we have different stereotype annotations. For repository, use repository. Go back here. Now, if you want to store this data in the database, I need object of alien repo. I will say repo is equal to, instead of saying new repo, or new alien repo, we will be using context.getBean, the alien repo.class. This is what I want. Now, once we got the object, I can simply say repo dot, I want to save the object. Let's say I want to save alien object, alien1. And maybe I want to print all the objects. So get all the objects from the table, or all the aliens from the table, and print it here. We have not done any changes yet, and we have not written any code to connect with database yet. But let's see if this works. Right click here and say run. Okay, taking some time because I'm running this for the first time. And you can see it says empty. Why it is not calling? Oh, I said added. I wanted to print added. What's wrong with me? Okay, so let's run this. And now, why it has not worked before, why I said / added is because I realized you don't like the videos. Poor me. Anyway, so you can see we got added here, and then we got this square bracket, which is empty, basically, empty array list. Now, let's make this work. So basically, we have to make sure that we write a code in the alien repo. This is the only file you have to work with now. We have to write a code where we can store this data in the database. So how exactly we are going to do that? It's very simple, basically. We have to use a JDBC template. Now, this is a part of your Spring Boot JDBC. So what you do is you have to get hold on, say, something called JDBC template. You just have to create the object of this. I will say this is template. Okay, so you have to get hold on the JDBC template. For this is a property, right? And this is the inbuilt stuff. If you can see, JDBC template belongs to springframework.jdbc.core. Okay. And you will see how easy it is to connect and all the stuff, right? You don't have to write connection con driver manager. Remember in JDBC we do that, and we don't have to prepare this statement. All this thing will be happening behind the scene. But for this, I need getter setters. I can just right click here, say generate getter setters for this JDBC template. That's done. And I want this object to be injected. So because we are just creating a reference of it, right? Where's the object? So Spring will take care of it. You don't have to worry. Because if you go to JDBC template, we can create object of this class. But again, for that, you have to do all the configuration. You can see we have to pass the object of data source. I don't want to do that. I just want my Spring framework to manage it. And the way you can do that is by just writing AutoWired. Your job is done. You got the JDBC template object. Now using that object, let's say I want to add this. I want to add the alien object. It's very simple now. You can simply use the template. Now this template, which is a JDBC template object, you have multiple methods. Now in normal JDBC, if you want to execute a statement, now based on which statement it is it a select query or is it other queries like delete, update? Now if you're working with select query, which is the reading, you basically use execute query as a method. If you want to change something, let's say update, insert, delete, you use execute update. Here, we want to save it, right? So we'll be using execute update. Execute update takes two parameters, in fact, multiple parameters, depending upon how you're doing it. The first one is the query. Of course, right, you need a query with you. So it's a string str or string SQL is equal to what is a query. Now here, I'm going to use a query like insert into what is my table name? Nowhere we have mentioned the table name, right? Let me make it similar to the class name, let's say alien. And then how many fields I have? So I have, let's say ID, I got name, and I got tech, okay? And then I want to specify values as well. Now, where are the values? So you tell me where are the values? Values are here. Inside this alien object, you got the values. We just have to pass these values here. Now, if you remember the prepared statement, we don't directly pass the values. What we do is we put question marks there so that we can replace this question mark later. So we are using prepared statement by default. Just pass the query here or pass the SQL here. After passing the SQL, you have to also replace this question marks with the actual values. So those are the remaining parameters you have. So after mentioning the query, just say alien.get ID, comma, alien.get name, comma, alien.get tech. That's it. This will basically save it. But will it work? That's a question, right? So let's see what happens if you run this, and we'll try to solve that later. Right click here and say run. I'm expecting error, but let's see what errors you get. Okay, we got the error, and the error is very simple. It says the table alien not found. Of course, right? H2 will give you database, not the table. Table is something you have to create by yourself. Now, how will I create the table? And that's where we have to add a schema in the resource folder. So you have to add two things actually. One is schema for the structure. And what if you want some default values? Maybe every time you create a table, you want certain values there to test it. For that, you have to create a file called data.sql, and we'll do that in this. So let's make it work. So what we are missing here is we are missing this table, and I've told solution we have to create a schema file, because H2, when it loads, we don't have a table there, right? Now to create that file, it's very simple. You can right click on resources and say new, and create a file called schema.sql and say enter. Now this is where you will write your script. Now the script to create your table. So the script for creating a table or the SQL query is create table, and we'll keep the table name as alien. And then you have to mention the properties or the columns. So the column which I want here is the first one is ID. Now the ID will be of type int, and we'll say this is a primary key. Then you will be having a name. Name will be of type varchar, and I will say the varchar is 20. In fact, maybe we have done this before. So normally in 20 characters, your name will be there. But then if you talk about South Indian names, I'm a South Indian, so I have a very big name. No, Navin Reddy is not my full name. My full name is Thadipalli Navin Kumar Bapareddy. I know that's huge. So maybe I will need 50 characters. And then here I will say marks. And again, marks will be of type int. And here we'll be having tech, and tech will be of varchar. And I will say varchar 20 because technologies can be shortened up. Even if you say artificial intelligence, it is AI. So let's keep it there. So basically, this is the file for the schema. Now we also need a file for the data. Again, not compulsory, but then I want to have some data. So I will have some insert statement here. So I will say insert into alien, and I want to insert 3 columns: ID, name, and tech. And what are the values I'm going to have here? So I will say value is 101. Then name in single quote, let's say Kiran. And let's say technology is blockchain. That's 1. And maybe I want 2 more. So I will just copy and paste it here. So this is 102, and this is Harsh. And let's say technology is AI, 103. And this is Sushil, let's say IoT. Okay, so basically we got this 3 rows already created. And now if we run this code, so we have created 2 files, schema and data.sql. I will just go back here to my main application and run this. And let's see what happens now. So when you run this, let's see it's taking some time again. Okay, so you can see there's no problem, there's no error. And we got empty here. So the reason it got empty is because if you see the repo, we are still returning the empty data. So we're not returning data from the table, okay? So the data is created. How do I know that the data is created? What I will do is, this update returns you the number of rows affected. So you can see we got int. So what I will do here is, I will say rows, and I want to see how many rows are affected. And then I will print the number of rows affected. So I will say rows plus space rows affected. Okay, so it will print how many rows got affected. Now if I run this code, of course we'll still return the empty array list, but at least I want to see, is it getting stored in the database? That's important. So it says 1 row or rows affected here. That's good. So that means we are able to insert. But now I want to fetch it. How do I fetch it? Now to fetch the data, again we can use our JDBC template, because if you see the template dot, there's one more method here which is called query. Now query returns you the data from table, right? So I will say query, but what is my query? So I will say string SQL. Basically I want to fetch all the records. I will say select star from alien. So what it will do is it will return all the rows, and then, okay, let's see what happens. So if I say SQL, it will return me the rows, right? But in which format? Now basically the query, you can see we have multiple methods of query to fetch the data. So we can use string, which is the SQL, and then you can use result set extractor, or you can say row call back handler, or we can use row mapper. For our example, row mapper makes sense. Now what row mapper will do is, I will show you one more time. So we have to basically pass the object of row mapper. So what happens is, when you get all the data in your result set, you want to fetch 1 row at a time, right? So row mapper will help you to give you 1 row at a time. To do that, we have to create the object of row mapper. So let's create one. So I will say row mapper, and row mapper will be working with a type alien. Let's say this is mapper equal to. Now how do we create object of row mapper? So we can say new row mapper. But the problem is, if you go to row mapper, it is an interface. This is a functional interface which has only one method called map row, and which takes 2 parameters. One is a result set. Now this result set will be given by your query, and then it also gives you a row number. So in result set, you might be having multiple rows, right? And you want to work with 1 row at a time. So this row number will take care of it. Okay, so basically I have to create object of row mapper, which has a method called map_row, and then I have two things here, which is result set and row number. Now basically this is an interface, right? So we have to create an anonymous inner class to do that, or we can also create a separate class which implements row mapper, then create the object of it. Again, that's your choice, but here I'm using anonymous inner class, and slowly we'll convert that into Lambda as well so that it will be a shorter code. But let's say we have this object here, which is mapper, and this is our anonymous inner class. So basically we have to do something here. So what we have to do is, this result set will have all the records, right? We have to take one record at a time. So what map_row does is, it takes the entire result set and it executes map_row multiple times depending upon how many rows you have. So if you have 4 rows, the map_row will execute 4 times and it will give you one object at a time. So basically we'll take that, we'll create an object of alien here. I will say alien A is equal to new alien, and then this alien object is empty, right, as of now, and I've written the same object. So you can see row mapper needs object of alien. So I'm creating the object here and then I'm returning it. But then this is an empty object, right? So it will not have values. The values are there in result set. So I can simply say a dot set ID and now get the value from the result set. So you can say get int. So how do you get data from result set? You have to say get int and pass the column number. So either you can say column number or you can say column name, both work. So here you can also mention ID. A dot set name, this will be coming from the second row. So get string, I will say 2 here, and then a dot set tech rs dot get string 3. As I mentioned before, you can also use a number or you can use a name of the column. And that's it. Once you got the data from result set, you are giving it to the alien object and then you are returning it. So basically row mapper will take care of the data one by one. Now the same object, which is of mapper, you have to pass it here. So you're not just passing a query, you are also specifying what to do with the result set. So if you click on query, it returns you the object of list of aliens. So the type is T, alien. So we have to accept the list of alien. I will say aliens is equal to this. So basically this query will return the list of aliens, and that's what you are going to return, not the new array list. So what we did is we fired the query, we got the data. It's just that we have to map it. We have to convert that data from result set into the list of aliens, and that's what we have done with the help of mapper. And that's it. I hope this will work. Let's see. Let me remove some extra spaces there. So with this, if I run this code, and again, I hope it will work. Let's run. Okay, can you see that? It worked. So basically alien 101, name Kiran, technology blockchain, 102 Harsh AI, 103 Sushil IoT, and then the new entry which we have added, 111 Naveen and Java. This is what we have added, right? So basically these things are working out. That's how you work with the Spring Boot with your JDBC. And yeah, that's it. In fact, you can do some more changes here if you want. Since this is a functional interface, we can use Lambda expression here. So we can remove from here to here, cut. We can also remove one curly brackets here. And you just have to put the arrow now. Let's remove the SQL exception. Let's put the arrow. And then in Lambda, we don't even need the type. So we can remove both the types here. And you know, one more thing, the row number is not getting used, right? So we can even use R there or any other variable if you want. Let's say A. Again, it will not make it readable, right? Because A is already there. Let's say row number, or we can say row. Okay, so this is the shorter code. Now you can also replace this mapper with this code. Again, this is optional. If you want to do it, you can try to use Lambda, not compulsory. So we don't need to create the reference here. We can directly use this, right? So that's how we can do it. In fact, you can also remove this part. You can directly write this particular statement in return. Even that works. So if I run this code once again, so you can see it works. So yeah, that's your Spring Boot JDBC. And if you observed, everything is happening with the help of JDBC template. So you don't have to basically do all this configuration by yourself, writing the connection statement, creating the statement, everything will be taken care by the template. You just have to specify the query and fire the query. So that's it from this video where we talked about Spring Boot JDBC. And if you like the video, please hit that like button and also subscribe if you want to see this type of videos more in future. Bye-bye everyone.